Well, I'd like to get to some questions because you've got a huge fan base, obviously, and we're getting all kinds of emails in our A&E Club, and one of them refers to being a woman in this industry.
Great.
As a young guitarist, you were the only woman respected enough to be allowed to play with the old-timers. Do you ever get a chance to play with them anymore? I guess a lot of them are not around
Well, I was
anymore.
going to say, it's a big problem is that so many of them passed away. And actually, there's a, Rory Block is a great blues guitar player that's been around as long as me, and we all had the pleasure at folk festivals, which is what's so great about blues festivals and folk festivals. And there's such a thriving all over the country and all over the world. This is what makes most roots music artists make a living, is the filming and the recording that come out of these great blues festivals, like the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. It was incredible playing with them, and, I learned so much. But I didn't at the time. I never thought about my slide playing or guitar playing in general, or whether I was a woman or a man. It's more that I recognize now that because it was an unusual thing, it set me apart and probably got my foot in the door. But I still think of myself as a musician more than just a, the guitar playing isn't as important as it is to other people. But I'm really glad you like it.
Well, because, the perception is that this industry, rock and roll, is very much of a macho, male-dominated industry, and you've been in the business for over 30 years now. Do you think it's changed, or is my perception wrong?
I don't think you're wrong. I think it's more behind the scenes, women engineers, women managers, women executives, women cameramen, there's some things
Not one
that
of them here.
There's some things that have changed and some things that haven't. And the stars, in terms of, there's always been beautiful women singers and women musicians. There's certainly more women in bands since like the late 80s, when that whole alternative music scene happened and looks weren't quite as important. But in general, it's a little bit of ageism, a little bit of looksism, and in terms of a glass ceiling, there's certain things that women certainly have not been held back at, and other ones where we have a ways to go to even it out a little bit. So from my point of view, I haven't felt any, I wouldn't put up with it, but I haven't felt any sexism regarding the musician part of what I do, but I certainly have seen it in other aspects of the business.
Yeah. Well, let's get to another question also from one of your fans. What is your one musical experience that you can say was better than the rest? That's tough.
Wow, that's an interesting question. Playing with, well, I could generalize and say doing the duets with the people I've had the incredible blessing of recording with Bebe, Aretha, Ray, John Lee, Bonnie Raitt, my favorite, if I had to pick one, Tony Bennett, Willie Nelson. It's an unbelievable array, because I do a lot of different musical styles, and I'm so honored to be held in that kind of esteem, to be asked to duet with these folks. So I'd have to say duetting with my dad was the highlight of my life, and duetting in general with people that I idolize is just as much of a thrill as it looks like.
This album was dedicated in honor of your parents, and they passed away this year. It was a very difficult year for you, also with your brother. He had brain cancer. Did music help you get through these difficult times at all?
Absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, I postponed the recording of the album until my dad was a little bit more stable, and I'd had some time to recover from my mom's passing. But actually, I recorded it in LA, and my dad was right down 20 minutes away, and I knew it was very comforting to know that I was carrying on the family tradition, and he was happy to know that I was recording. And it's still 35 years on, pretty amazing to have this career. Healthy and strong, and look at him, he was singing up until his 88th birthday, so I was keeping the name flying, as he said, and I think the time in the studio was it was a good distraction from the stress of wondering if he was going to be okay, and it was cathartic and very, music just lifts you up. The work of music is very satisfying, but the actual creation and singing and playing was incredibly cathartic to express the stress I was going through.
I wonder, though, when you're a child of a very successful, accomplished parents, both of your parents were very talented, it's sometimes hard to carve out your own identity. Did you ever struggle with that?
My dad was just one of a kind. My folks had the legitimate Broadway theater background. They were like real musicians. My dad could actually sing without a microphone, which I could never do, except around a campfire. So I was basically a folk artist and played music for a hobby, did some high school musical productions, But I just think of it as such, there's pop music and then there's the Broadway stage. So for me, it was easy to carve my own identity because I was the child of my times with the Beatles and soul music and Motown and Bob Dylan and Joan Baez, and then I became a blues hound. So my folks were pleasantly surprised that I was good at what I did, and I weren't that happy when I dropped out of school.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask, because you were at Harvard for 3 years, then you gave it up.
I got a record deal, and I said,
Yeah.
you know, this is only going to last for a year. I'll be back and finish. But it didn't really make a big difference. I went back and got the arts medal years ago, and they said, you know, you can still come back and get that degree. But I think my folks were really pleased and surprised, as I was, to get that kind of a career right off the bat.
Well, let's get to another question. This is also about your father. What was the best advice your dad gave you on being in the music industry?
Oh, you know, his integrity was unshakable, and I think his model, he didn't even have to say anything. It's the way he lived his life. He was incredibly positive, and he was non-admonishing about my lifestyle, which, as you can say, there is a bit of a different lifestyle involved with rock and roll than the Broadway stage. He would watch me, you know, sometimes get colds and be tired and, you know, want to come in off the road, and he said, you know, very gently, if you take good care of yourself, your voice will stay and be healthy. And it was just his way of saying, get some rest and stop clowning around so much. You know, you have an obligation to your fans. And I never would let any of my extracurricular activities affect my show. It was always after, and I'm sure that's from my dad.
So a good work ethic.
Oh, good work ethic, to respect the instrument, that your voice is a reflection of your whole body. And that, you know, it's not like something separate that you drink tea to get back, you know. Take good care of yourself and you'll last a long time.
So how do you take good care of yourself?
Well, there's things I don't do anymore that wouldn't be qualified as taking care of myself. I do yoga. I've done it for about 16 years. I love it because it's, you know, doesn't cost anything. You can do it in your hotel room. It's a great thing for on the road. Keeps you lithe and keeps, you know, my joints good and my skin feels better, and I just feel better doing it. But I'm out every day in gardens and by the, you know, botanical gardens. I take cabs, or I get out with my bike, and the rest of the band, when they're up, they bike too. So we really make an effort as we're getting older to try to fight back that lethargy that happens from laying around. You know, you get out of shape, you put on weight, you don't look as good, you don't feel as good, and nobody wants to feel bad, you know. 50 is, you know, the new 30.
50 is fabulous.
50 is the new 30,
yeah.
And 55 is even more fun than 50, so look out.
That's good to hear. Well, you look great. Thanks. One other question from an online viewer. I've loved your music since the 70s. Why are there so few blues guitarists who are female, even after you paved the way?
Well, thank you for saying that, but there actually are quite a few. And Susan Tedeschi and Lauren Ellis and Rory Block, Deborah Coleman. I mean, I'm going to stop this interview and then think of these people. There's actually quite a bit of great guitar players that are out there, and more coming up all the time. But, you know, it surprises me that we haven't found a new Stevie Ray Vaughan, but I'd say Susan Tedeschi is really getting close.
Okay, so we should check her out.